Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to put aside all the daily noise from the press briefings and look at the actual machinery of strategy.
Yeah, and we have a really interesting stack of reporting today. It's from U.S. Capitol Unmasked, some sharp analysis from Chris Hayes, and then these internal leaks coming out via Zateo.
And what's so fascinating is they all seem to be pointing the compass in the exact same direction.
For once, yes. It paints a very specific, and I'd say a somewhat unnerving picture of the administration as we head into early 2026.
It does. But the entry point for this whole conversation, it isn't some big piece of legislation.
Right.
It sounds like something you'd hear on ESPN.
Right, the empty seat in the VIP box.
Exactly, the canceled Super Bowl appearance. Now, usually, we would not dedicate an entire deep dive to a scheduling change.
Of course not.
But the sources we're looking at today, they argue this isn't about football at all. It's what they call a signal event. It's a high-level case study in how a leadership team behaves when unchecked power starts to collide with sliding popularity.
And that's really the mission for this deep dive. We're not here to gossip about a flight to California. We're here to look at this like political consultants would. I mean, we are 9 months out from the 2026 midterms.
Right.
And the administration is pivoting. The reporting suggests they are moving away from a strategy of persuasion, trying to win people over to one of containment and confrontation.
So let's set the scene. Santa Clara, California. It's the Super Bowl. President Trump was scheduled to be there. And then, pretty abruptly, he wasn't.
And the official line from the press secretary was a mix of things. Logistical headaches, it's too far, scheduling conflicts.
Maybe he didn't like the halftime show performers. That was another one.
Right, which, if you know anything about presidential travel, is basically a non-answer. It's the press release you put out when you don't want to answer the real question.
Okay, let's unpack that. Because to the average person, scheduling conflict sounds plausible.
Sure.
But U.S. Capitol Unmasked just tears that excuse apart from a logistical standpoint.
Oh, completely. Look, the president travels in an entirely self-sufficient bubble. Air Force One is a flying command center. Distance is, frankly, irrelevant when you can refuel in midair.
And he loves this kind of stage. He's been there before.
Exactly. He views the Super Bowl as the ultimate cultural theater. So the logistics argument is just hollow.
Which means we have to look at the alternative. And this is where the reporting from Zateo gets really interesting. They claim their sources were in on the internal debate.
And they weren't talking about flight times. They were talking about a political nightmare.
A political nightmare, specifically the nightmare of reception. And this is where we have to put our consultant hats on.
Yeah.
So play devil's advocate for me. Presidents get mixed receptions. Obama got heckled. Bush got booed at baseball games. Why is this different? Why pull the ripcord on this specific event?
It's about the environment and the amplification. The Zateo sources are really explicit here. The fear was of a viral moment of mass disapproval.
So not just a few hecklers.
No. We're talking about the potential for sustained, loud, undeniable booing from a crowd of 70,000 people.
Broadcast live to 100 million households.
And you can't mute that. You can't filter the audio on a live broadcast in real time. In a controlled rally, you control everything. The mic, the crowd, the camera angles. At the Super Bowl, you have the general public.
So the advisors basically warned that a clip of the president being drowned out by boos would be catastrophic.
Catastrophic. Because it just shatters the whole narrative of the people's choice.
Right. One advisor, I think is quoted in the report, said you cannot have the commander-in-chief look like a pariah 9 months before a midterm.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So when you pull the principal off the stage, that is a defensive maneuver. It signals that the internal polling is telling them something very, very scary.
That phrase, defensive maneuver, that really stands out. It implies they are reacting to a threat. They're not on offense anymore.
They are absolutely on defense. And the threat isn't the other party right now, it's the electorate. The sources say the mood in the West Wing is getting close to panic levels.
Why?
They've decided that putting the president in any uncontrolled environment is now a high-risk activity.
Which is just a stunning admission for a populist leader.
It's a paradox, right? You claim to represent the people, but you can't actually be seen with the people unless you've vetted them first.
Okay, so let's dig into that panic. Because you don't panic off a hunch, you panic off data. What are the numbers telling them?
Well, the macro numbers are bad. Economic confidence is down. Immigration policy is polling poorly. But there's one a specific micro data point that U.S. Capitol Unmasked highlighted, a special election in Texas that seems to have been a real wake-up call.
This is for a state Senate seat, right?
Correct.
Well,
And look, usually you hear special election, you think, low turnout, weird results, you can dismiss it.
yeah, not representative
But the White House political team is reportedly obsessed with it.
because of the margins.
The margins are just shocking. A Democrat flipped a deep red seat and didn't just squeak by. Won by 14 points.
Okay, so give us the context there. What was the baseline for that district?
In 2024, Donald Trump carried that exact same district by 17 points.
Wait. So do the math for us.
That is a 31-point swing from plus 17 Republican to plus 14 Democrat.
31 points.
Yeah.
That is seismic. That's not a wave, it's a tsunami.
It's an avalanche. And this is why Chris Hayes' analysis here is so important. He points out that you don't need a 31-point swing nationally to change the government. I mean, a 10-point swing is a historic blowout.
And you need even less than that to flip the House.
Oh, absolutely. A uniform 5-point swing in the midterms would wipe out the Republican House majority, probably cost them the Senate too. So when the strategists see a 31-point swing in a stronghold, they aren't thinking we need to campaign harder.
They're thinking
They are thinking the floor is falling out.
the floor is falling out. That's a terrifying thought for an incumbent. So behaviorally, when a leadership team sees the math is just broken, what's the move?
They stop asking, how do we win over voters? And they start asking, how do we protect ourselves? You shift from persuasion to structural engineering.
And that takes us to what the sources call Plan A. Apparently, the administration saw this coming and tried to get ahead of it.
Right. Plan A was the gerrymandering strategy.
We hear that term all the time. But usually redistricting happens once a decade after the census.
Correct. But there's a controversial tactic called mid-decade redistricting. Basically, a state legislature just decides they don't like the maps anymore, and they redraw them right now, specifically to squeeze out more seats for their party.
So Trump's plan was to pressure red states to re-rig the map ahead of schedule.
Exactly. Why try to convince voters in a swing district when you can just redraw the lines so the swing district doesn't exist anymore?
But it fizzled. Why? I mean, if the party controls these state legislatures, why not just do it?
It failed for two main reasons: internal resistance and an external threat. In Indiana, the reporting says Republicans basically told the White House to take a hike, even after J.D. Vance flew out there in person to apply pressure.
But why would they refuse? Wouldn't that help them?
Not always. Incumbents love safe seats. Opening up the maps creates chaos, it invites lawsuits, it can put their own seats in flux. Local politics often trumps national strategy.
Okay, and the external threat.
That was the blue states, specifically California. Democrats there basically signaled they would play a game of mutually assured destruction. Meaning, if red states started aggressively redrawing maps, California would immediately do the same and wipe out maybe 7 or 8 Republican seats in California alone.
So the net gain would be zero.
Or even negative. So between the stubbornness in Indiana and the counter threat from California, Plan A was a complete wash. It's dead.
And that's the pivot point. If you can't win by being popular, that's the Super Bowl problem, and you can't win by rigging the maps, you're in a corner.
And that's where, according to the Zateo leaks and Chris Hayes, things start to get dark. They're being forced toward a much more aggressive Plan B.
Seizing the machinery.
That is the exact phrase used, fully seizing the machinery of American voting. This is a shift from, standard political maneuvering to systemic manipulation.
And the sources point to a specific change in the rhetoric. It's less, vote for me, I'm doing a great job, and more, the whole system is broken.
It's the delegitimization of the election before a single ballot is cast. The argument is that Trump isn't preparing to win a free and fair election. He's preparing to have a justification to overturn it if he loses.
The reporting points back to 2020, the Georgia call.
Right, the infamous Brad Raffensperger call. Find me 11,780 votes. And for years, the debate was, was that just Trump venting? Or a specific demand?
Yeah.
The analysis in this deep dive suggests the administration views that call not as a mistake, but as a prototype.
A prototype for what?
For how to pressure the machinery. The fear is that in 2026, the strategy won't be to win the vote count, but to create enough chaos and apply enough pressure on local officials to flip the result after the fact.
But you need people willing to follow those orders. Raffensperger said no.
Exactly. And that is why the staffing changes are so critical. The sources describe a coup-ready inner circle being assembled right now.
That is a very loaded term, coup ready.
It is. But look at the personnel moves. They are purging the institutionalists, the career people who care about the rules, and replacing them with pure loyalists.
And by loyalist, you don't mean someone who agrees on tax policy.
No, it means
Hmm.
someone whose answer will be yes when they're told to decertify a county's votes or to seize voting machines. They're removing anyone who would say, Mr. President, that's illegal.
They're removing the friction.
They're building a fortress. They see the storm coming in the polling data, so they're boarding up the windows and making sure they're the only ones holding the keys.
I want to circle back to the Super Bowl for a second because there was another story that fits perfectly into this Plan B narrative.
Yes, the immigration pivot. And this gives us a really important clue about where they feel vulnerable.
The report mentioned initial leaks about a massive immigration enforcement operation.
Right. The word was that federal agents would have a highly visible presence at or around the Super Bowl venue, which is, it's unheard of.
Right. Super Bowl's a party. It's not a border checkpoint.
But it was intended as a show of force, pure optics. They wanted the visual of toughness to energize the base.
And it didn't happen.
No. The backlash was immediate. Community leaders, civil rights groups, they all went ballistic, saying it would turn a celebration into a police state.
And the administration just folded.
Quietly and quickly, the plan was just scrapped. No agents, no press release. Just like the president's attendance, they realized the optics were a liability.
And that's so interesting because the brand is never back down. But in one weekend, you have two instances where public pressure forced a retreat.
That's the big consultant takeaway here. Optics are currently overriding ideology. The data shows that while the base loves the tough talk on immigration, the suburbs, the people who decide midterms, are alienated by it.
It also tells us something about resistance, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
The sources seem to argue against the idea that resistance is futile.
They absolutely do. Santa Clara is the proof. Resistance forced them to recalculate. And it's not just public pressure. The reports also highlight Jamie Raskin's analysis of the courts.
He argues the legal system is holding up.
Better than you might think. We focus on the Supreme Court, but Raskin points out that the lower courts are issuing injunctions.
An injunction is basically just a stop button.
Exactly. It's a court order that says, you cannot enforce this rule until we have a full trial. And those trials can take years. So when the administration tries to overreach, the courts are hitting the pause button.
So between the legal system jamming the gears and the public pushing back, they're actually kind of boxed in.
They're boxed in. And that explains the panic. A confident leader does not retreat from a football game. They are reacting from a position of weakness, not strength.
So if we synthesize all of this, the canceled trip, the 31-point swing, the failed gerrymandering, the pivot to attacking the election itself, what's the bottom line here?
The synthesis is that we are entering a period of maximum danger because of the administration's weakness.
That sounds counterintuitive. We usually fear a strong authoritarian.
A strong authoritarian can be patient. A weak one who sees power slipping away gets desperate. They are preparing to challenge the rules of the game because they know they can't win by playing it normally.
So what's the advice from the sources? What should you, the listener, be thinking?
The sources are very clear on this. The response is not panic. It is preparation.
Intellectual preparation.
Yes. Knowing the playbook. We shouldn't be surprised when the rigged election claims ramp up this summer. We shouldn't be shocked when they try to fire investigators.
It's about inoculating yourself against the shock value of it.
Exactly. If you know it's coming, it loses its power to disorient you. You recognize it for what it is. A desperate plan B from a political operation that knows it's underwater.
And recognizing that public pressure actually matters. The Super Bowl retreat proved that.
It forces them to retreat, to recalculate. It buys time. And in politics, time is the most valuable currency there is.
It's a fascinating, if a little unsettling, look behind the curtain. We started with a canceled flight and ended up talking about the potential dismantling of election integrity.
It just shows how connected these things are. A leader who is afraid of being booed is a leader who is afraid of the voters.
Yeah.
And history shows us that a leader who's afraid of the voters, that's a dangerous thing in a democracy.
Which brings us to our final thought today. We always like to leave you with a question to chew on.
Yeah, and here's the question I'm left with after all this. We saw Donald Trump retreat from the Super Bowl because he was afraid of a negative reception, afraid of the optics.
He wouldn't face the music.
Right, so ask yourself this. If a leader is too afraid of public reception to attend a football game, What extreme length might that same leader go to in order to avoid the ultimate public rejection, losing an election?
That is the question of the year. If he can't handle a stadium of boos, how does he handle a nation of no?
Exactly. That is the scenario that Plan B is being built for.
We will be watching closely, and we encourage you to watch not just what happens, but what doesn't happen. The canceled events, the quiet reversals, that's where the real story often is. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.
Take care.